February 5, 2024, Banbury, United Kingdom. In a quiet industrial park, the administrators enter a sleek, modern facility. They are there to shut down a company that was once valued at $13 billion. A company that was supposed to save the British car industry. A company that had deals with UPS, Uber, and the backing of the biggest financial institutions in the world. But as the doors locked for the final time, the auditors found something terrifying. After 9 years of hype, billions of dollars in investment, and thousands of futuristic CGI videos, the company had not sold a single mass-produced vehicle to a customer. This is the story of Arrival. It is the story of a startup that didn't just want to build electric vans, they wanted to destroy the concept of the factory itself. They promised to replace the century-old assembly line with robots and software. They promised to build cars in microfactories that could be set up in a standard warehouse in any city in the world. It was a vision so seductive that Wall Street fell in love with it. But it was a vision based on a dangerous delusion that manufacturing is easy if you have enough code. This is how $13 billion evaporated into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a ghost fleet of prototypes. To understand why this failure was so spectacular, we have to go back to London in 2015. Denis Sverdlov, a Russian billionaire who had made his fortune in telecommunications, looked at the automotive industry and saw a dinosaur. He looked at Ford, Toyota, and even Tesla, and he saw waste. Traditional car manufacturing is incredibly expensive. You need a gigafactory. You need massive stamping presses to bend metal. You need toxic paint shops. You need an assembly line that stretches for miles. Sverdlov believed this was outdated. He founded Arrival with a radical idea, the Microfactory. The plan was science fiction come to life. Arrival would not use steel. They would use a proprietary composite material, a mix of plastic and fiberglass that didn't need painting. This meant no expensive paint shops. They wouldn't use a conveyor belt. Instead, they would use cells. Autonomous robots would carry the parts to a station, assemble a section of the van, and move to the next. Sverdlov claimed that a microfactory would cost only $50 million to set up, compared to the $1 billion needed for a traditional car plant. He claimed he could deploy them in months, not years. For the first 5 years, Arrival operated in stealth mode. They hired top engineers from Apple and Tesla. They built sleek, futuristic prototypes that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie. The Arrival van was beautiful. It had a massive glass windshield, a driver-centric cockpit, and a modular design. Then came the boom. In 2020 and 2021, the world was drowning in cheap money. Interest rates were near zero, and investors were desperate for the next Tesla. Arrival emerged from the shadows at the perfect moment. They announced a partnership with UPS. The delivery giant ordered 10,000 electric vans. This was the validation the world needed. If UPS trusted them, the technology must be real. In March 2021, Arrival went public on the NASDAQ stock exchange. The stock exploded. The company was valued at over $13 billion. For a brief moment, this startup, which had zero revenue, was worth more than highly established manufacturers like Mazda or Renault. The British press hailed it as the UK's Tesla. They were opening headquarters in London and Charlotte, North Carolina. They were hiring thousands of people. But inside the microfactories, the dream was colliding with reality. The problem with reinventing the wheel is that the wheel works very well. The traditional assembly line, invented by Henry Ford, is efficient for a reason. Arrival's cell-based assembly was a nightmare to coordinate. The robots required complex software that didn't exist yet. The composite material, the plastic skin of the van, was difficult to produce consistently. It was often brittle or didn't fit together perfectly. While Tesla and Chinese manufacturers were focused on production hell, spending every waking hour trying to build cars faster, Arrival was stuck in prototype hell. They were constantly redesigning the vehicle. They were obsessed with vertical integration, trying to build their own motors, their own batteries, their own inverters, and even their own software stack. They were trying to do everything at once, without having sold a single unit. By 2022, the cracks were turning into canyons. The global economy shifted. Inflation spiked, and interest rates rose. The era of free money ended. Investors stopped looking at, quote, future potential and started asking for, quote, current revenue. Arrival had none. The company began to burn cash at an alarming rate. They were spending millions every month on expensive offices, high salaries, and R&D, but the factory in Bicester, UK was silent. The promised delivery dates for the UPS vans came and went. First it was, production starts in Q3 2021, then Q2 2022, then 2023. Desperation set in. In a frantic attempt to save the company, the leadership made a chaotic pivot. They announced they were pausing the bus project. Then they announced they were pausing the car project, designed for Uber. Then, in a shocking move, they announced they were effectively abandoning the UK market, their home, to focus entirely on the US market to chase government subsidies. They laid off half their workforce. The Microfactory concept, the very soul of the company, proved to be its undoing. It turned out that building a car in a warehouse is not cheaper. It is just slower and more complicated. The stock price, which had once traded above $300, split adjusted, crashed to less than $1. The company received a delisting warning from NASDAQ. The $13 billion valuation had shrunk to practically zero. In late 2023, Arrival tried one last Hail Mary. They sought a merger, a buyout, anything to keep the lights on. But no one wanted to buy a car company that couldn't build cars. The Microfactory was a toxic asset. The proprietary composite material was a liability. On February 5, 2024, the inevitable happened. Arrival's UK division entered administration. The US division followed soon after. The 10,000 vans for UPS were never delivered. The Uber car never picked up a passenger. The collapse of Arrival is a brutal lesson in the difference between tech and manufacturing. In Silicon Valley, you can launch a beta version of software, fix the bugs later, and scale infinitely with zero marginal cost. Arrival tried to apply this logic to heavy industry. But you cannot patch a physical van over the air if the wheels fall off. You cannot scale a factory by copying code. Arrival sold a story that the world desperately wanted to believe, that we could have green, futuristic manufacturing without the heavy lifting of traditional industry. They sold the destination, but they forgot to build the road. Today, the microfactories are empty, the robots are sold for scrap, and $13 billion of wealth exists only as a memory of a time when we thought a PowerPoint presentation could replace an assembly line.